The scale of what I'm about to talk about is absolutely amazing. And I should probably give you a little background. I'm not a traditional academic. I spent most of my life doing large-scale corporate turnarounds. I cut my teeth on the first Chrysler bankruptcy back in 1979. Worked a lot with Philips Electronics, Toyota, and Honda, and a number of others. My role was fundamentally to live with customers all around the world, to see how they experience value in their own lives, which is something that companies rarely do, and then begin to translate that value back through the entire supply and demand chain, which brought me into factories in most of what we used to call the third world, and my friends who are there still are proud of that term because they are arguing that we're rapidly becoming third, not first. And so I have a lot of experience with people in factories who have been taught, or where people will sort of descend on them and say, you have to do things this way. And what I saw, especially with Toyota and Honda, is that there's a huge amount of latent expertise among anybody, no matter how visibly uneducated they are, makes no difference. Toyota used to get across its complicated statistical process control in any way they could. They adapted it to the local languages, of course, but also to the illiterate. And one of my most interesting illiteracy cases was about 300 miles north of here in the Fremont plant, where I worked in the NUMMI operation, which at that time was the best place to get drugs in the entire San Francisco area. The union owned the floor. General Motors managers were terrified to go down there. There were guns on the floor, 17% illiteracy rate, and a 47%, 48% functional illiteracy rate. And I walked into the plant one day, and here was a Toyota executive, perhaps 90 pounds, surrounded by massive motorcycle type folks, chains and everything else, and they were fascinated. They were just focused on him. And he had a comic book, essentially, which explained how to do statistical process control. It was effectively SPC Man, right? And it hit me. I was almost in tears, and sometimes I get emotional about it again. What hit me was, this is the first time anybody paid attention to those people since probably 4th grade when they checked out of school. So that is a theme I'm going to continue today. Only we're going to multiply it by 2 or 3 billion. Everything I say today, multiply by 2 or 3 billion, right? Because we've had what is probably the most rapid restructuring of technology in the planet in the last 7 years. I'm also a historian, I'm a student of history, and I'm betting that what we're doing right now is the human species is literally reorganizing itself for a new meta layer of organization, similar to when the kings took over from the church, and similar to when the corporations took over from the kings about 150 years ago. Right? And here's a really good point, that none of us know where it's going. So anybody who claims to be an expert on this, you're wrong. Right? Because the numbers and the challenges and the sheer scope and speed of this means, just like we couldn't predict what would happen when the automobile replaced the horse, we can't predict what will happen. Let me just dive into this. I'm calling it social innovation at the edge of electricity because it used to be that's where economics ran out. Up until about 30 years ago, you needed electricity and water, otherwise you could not execute a business model. Just couldn't do it, right? And what we're seeing here is that with small amounts of electricity and tiny amounts of water, the new technology, especially mobile technology, is being deployed into places where there is no longer any electricity or water. Traditional cases, I'm really making 2 points here. One is the world has changed. 2 is, and I'm speaking primarily for business cases, but I think it also applies for case material elsewhere. The traditional case is still useful for teaching the basics and conditioning people to think in a logical way. They are completely and utterly useless for trying to handle whatever it is that's going on in the world. And there's several reasons. One, a traditional case is a bounded problem. It has fixed teaching points, and it assumes that the teacher is an expert. And I don't know if you do this, but I know sometimes when I'm teaching a case, I get really nervous. I can't remember what those teaching points were. And I was trained at Harvard, and I love to have those little surprises that make students feel totally inadequate. Right? The teacher gains control that way. I don't do that, but just like this sort of thing, right? And you can find them in the case. Usually what I do is I highlight them and say, look, here's the tricks, right? So, figure them out in advance. The world is way too complicated for simple cases. And I love Babson mainly because there are not a lot of instructions there. Also because 60 to 80% of my students are international. They come from these locations. So they don't find a lot of this stuff weird. And some of them own companies, or their parents own companies. And they can literally overnight bring video into the classroom from the companies in ways that enhance the cases, right? So Babson has almost no boundaries. I also found out that they had been Skyping their parents into my class for about 5 years without telling me, right? And they were clearly still paying tuition. I figured that wasn't so bad. The world is way too complicated. About 2 or 3 years ago, I had an epiphany. How many of you teach? You're standing there every once in a while, and you're in the rhythm, and then your mind starts to do something else. Like mathematics or whatever, right? Well, I'm there, and all of a sudden I realize, this bunch of students in front of me are paying, at that point, $13,500 for that class. I'm sitting there, and I was trying to keep control and not go, oh my gosh! Right? And so, my mind was over there, I'm going, this is something else, right? So I had a crisis of confidence and everything very quickly, right? But I'm not worth this. And besides, my neurologist friends will tell you, even if I am great tonight for 2.5 hours, you will remember at best 3% of what happens in the class, right? And I'm sitting there going, this is very strange. Now, I live outside that. So I began asking myself, can I give them more than a $6 experience that is copyrighted? Do you know what, by the way, do you know what mechanical transfer is? It's a new form of copyright, probably invented by Harvard. It's that if the student buys cases and their brother or sister comes to the school the next year, you're not allowed to physically transfer it to them. It's a mechanical transfer. I think it's absurd. Anyway, sorry, don't get me off on that. Here's what I figured out. I actually sat down. For the price of 3 classes, I can get 20 students to produce what I'll call a living case in a second in Honduras for 4 days. And I know that because we took a bunch of people there. Thank you, Cheryl. Right? We took people there. We calculated. We kept track of everything. And we came back with a bunch of video. I can't show you today because it would take too long. But it was about an Italian company that cleaned up the cement business in Italy and then said, are there any other industries we could clean up? How about gold? It's terrible, big holes in the ground. Cyanide, right? And they found a small cooperative of hand panning gold miners. And then, without disrupting what they did, in this river, 135 kilometers from Tegucigalpa, right? They managed to create a codependent business model with them, and have now been able to scale up gold mining to a way that does not need cyanide and could probably change the way we do mining for electronics. Right? We did all that in 4 days. So I'm sitting here going, the economics are obvious. Now, why can't we do this? Well, the reason, the direct answer is, and I realize we're on video, on tape, is that we're in America and we have risk assessment. And trying to get an institution, even one that believes in all kinds of crazy entrepreneurship, to agree to get students, while they're students, to an offshore location is extraordinarily complicated. Right? Extraordinarily complicated. I'm on a mission. If we can't bring them there, we're going to bring it here, right? And then we're going to figure out new kinds of internships post-commencement. If we can get them there, they're going to learn a whole bunch more than they will in a classroom. I do this with executives now. I make them actually go to Bangalore and use their own mobile phones. And you have to use them. And they come back and go, these are terrible. I once had 30 executives from an unnamed cellular company having all kinds of problems in Finland right now. And I made them ride up and down the Caltrain up here, and they had to take pictures of things. And what they learned was, oh my gosh, this is America. Your networks are terrible. We had no idea they were so bad. Right? You really learn stuff. We're the third world of networks here. Chris is not here, but his network's really good. The other thing is, The living case, as I'll show in a second, is actually an online open source kind of thing, right, as it's currently conceived. And if 20 students start recording things and then put it online, thousands of other students can see it, and we can begin to learn in a totally different way. And it's easy for faculty and others to grab new teaching materials and move them around. What is a living case? This is a quick schematic of it. This is what we took from the gold mine in Honduras. Basically, you know there's a story that says ethical gold. What Gold Lake had done is to get agreements for everybody in the supply chain, from the dirt to Cartier, and they could certify both human and environmental goodness, literally, throughout the entire chain. That was the main thing they did. So we knew we would find that story there. We knew we'd find something else, but we're also looking for all the derivative stories, because none of us ever does anything in a vacuum. And we're always connected to something else. And the world does not divide into nice subjects like marketing and finance and history. It all happens at the same time. So down here we have what I call video breaks. We went to Honduras for 4 days. We shot everything. We discovered some amazing other pieces. I'll get to in a second. You come home and you very quickly take the video. Without a lot of thought, you cut them into about 3-second, 5-second, 12-second, and maybe 1-minute clips, and you put some kind of a content tag on it, and you don't care if it's really accurate, because search is now so good, you can find it later. And we haven't done this at this point, but the objective is to take all of this and have all those assets in a Creative Commons license and available for people just about anywhere. And then what we would do, our promise is we will quickly, and within 2 weeks, we had a video-based case taken from the field in Honduras. We gave it to our students, and part of the deal is that we video the students and show it to the company, because if you get 45 people reacting to something, you get information. So the company gets something back right away, right? And then we post certain of those comments, and it becomes an extension of the case. Now, if you are teaching at an unnamed Harvard Business School, right, and you want to surprise students, this doesn't work. Because the whole trick is to maintain control over the class for those 5 teaching points. This is a very, very different thing. And it basically means the teacher learns along with the students. Now, I happen to find that fun. And oh, by the way, maybe I'm lazy, but it's also easy. I mean, it's a whole bunch easier to just say, what do you think? And then listen. And you'll always find somebody, right, who has a great idea. Right? So, this is open. Now then, the other piece of this is you find a whole bunch of other derivative stories. What did we find in Honduras? Purely by accident. We thought the company was doing us, showing us the obligatory social investments. So here's the church. It was a really good church. They built the church, right? And then they said, oh, you got to see the water thing. Well, what's the water thing? Well, the rivers were filled with cholera. If you want people to be healthy working in the co-op, the gold co-op, they've got to have clean water. There was a faculty member from Cornell who had been trying to get this introduced all over the world without a lot of success. But have you seen those little corrugated pieces of plastic that you use, that you see on roofing, garden sheds and things like that? He had a way of you stack it up, fill it with sand, and then put the right kind of bacteria in there, sort of like acidophilus living cultures. Then it will clean water, and you just have to get the rates of the stuff going through. Now, somebody had a brilliant idea, which is, instead of us Anglos coming in and building that for them, why not build a building, put a small apartment in it, get a family to live there, and they will know every piece of this technology, and they know how to run this thing, right? So there are 4 of us from a business school looking at this going, this is a business in a box. With a little bit of encouragement, we could teach the family in there how to set up a franchise model. And there are about 125 other towns that could use this. And if you don't finance it from America at very high capital costs, they can make a ton of money. And that might take you a couple of weeks. And then you coach them for a while. Right? Now that story is buried over here. Right? There are a whole other bunch of stories. We were watching the gold people in the river. The river has cholera. We're thinking their shoes are probably the most important tools they have, because how do they survive? Well, it turns out there's a whole thing in here on what are the right kinds of shoes to wear when you have a cholera epidemic. Now, I don't know, well, what if you posted that online for other people who have to work in those environments? Well, guess what? Here's the point, they all have mobile phones. I'll move on, right? So there's the expected story, the video bricks assembled into your main story, discovered stories, and then people can repurpose this. Now, the only thing we're missing right now is a piece of data organizing software that is not hierarchical. Now, this is my lesson. Most American software is hierarchical in some way, shape, or form. We've got to find something that isn't really expensive to distribute this. Was this at all clear? I have to check this because I get really pumped.
I have just a question.
Yeah.
So it was 4 days, but you did all of this and discovered all the discovered stories within 4 days?
Yes.
How many students or teams?
No, these were basically 4 people. So there was 2 professors and 2 outsiders that were along for the ride. Plus, well, one of them was outsiders, and we all had video cameras. We just handed up. We use very, very simple video cameras, but they will shoot as well as that Canon 7D, whatever it is, right? And they'll shoot as well as the Sonys outside in the big truck. I've got 2 of them right here in my briefcase. And you just push a button, so you get broadcast quality and just point and shoot. And they shot everything.
But you're allowed, you can do that and do what to me takes time is the discovered stories as well.
Yeah, they pretty much stand out.
Yeah,
they do.
Make sure it was 4 days.
It was 4 days, and the technical part, it took about 18 hours to cut the first set of bricks. But people, I mean, you do this yourself. You walk down the street, you notice things. What's that? What are they doing? Right? And just shoot it, right? And somebody in the group will know what it is. All right. So that's basically what a living case is, and here's why we've come up with this and why I'm talking like this. I'm going to tell you a story, which is a very happy story, but it's about the reorganization of the world. The world is surprisingly wealthy. I'll show you in a second. There are 7 billion humans who have access to mobile phones right now. We tend to have, I'm speaking we, mainly North America, mainly a media-based thing. We tend to think there are a whole bunch of people out there who need our help. Well, they haven't been waiting for it. So they've been hanging on their own. And now they have a lot more tools, right? And they're certainly not waiting for it. Those mobile phones are key. This is crucial. We can all shoot video with mobile phones, and video crosses over ignorance, illiteracy, whatever you want to call it, uneducated. It crosses over the lack of formal education, and it crosses over language barriers. So if you can get a student to read a voiceover, you don't have to do this, but if you get a student to read a voiceover in 3 core languages, that'll go almost anywhere in the world. But you don't have to, because people can watch what's going on, right? This is huge. Just think about how much of our educational business is text-based. It's just limiting. It limits you in time, it limits you in many different ways. Video, shoot it. That's it. Entrepreneurship, among the bottom 5 billion, is extremely high profit. The returns on investment on what I'm about to show you make Wall Street look sick. Sicker than it actually is, okay? And this is not something that might happen in the future. This is, the bottom 5 billion have already transformed things. I'm going to show you the music business briefly today. It fundamentally transformed international businesses. I don't have enough credibility with you yet to show you they are cracking the genome on mobile phones. We're allocating data out to little apps that run in the background on mobile phones, right? And that's one of the reasons that the genomic advances are so fast right now. I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I'm pretty sure they're going to rescue us from gridlock. Us means the Americans. We have so many bureaucratic systems here, and they're coming up with new systems like true patient-centered medical records. In Africa and Asia, before they had IT, the hospital, every doctors, who keeps the medical record? They said, who's the person most motivated to keep the medical record about the kids? The mom. So in a lot of places, the mom has a book which is equivalent to the family Bible in the United States before 1932, when we had Social Security numbers, that had all of the families in it. You guarded that with your life. House starts burning, grab the Bible, go. Shack starts burning, grab the Bible, grab the medical records and go. And what it does for the hospital is the hospital only has to supplement the records every once in a while, which means the data load on the hospital is low, so we don't have to spend $23 billion on hierarchical systems which the manufacturing companies threw out 30 years ago. Are you still okay? Am I making everybody right? Just checking. Just checking how far we can go here. All right. Now let me move this up a little bit. Here, wealth. This is, I don't know where they get the data, but probably the Catholic Church. From 1500, right, to there, right? Now, this is a very important date, right about here. Right here. Do you know what that date is? Take a wild guess. Right about there. It's 1900. Right about there. 1946, 47, that's sort of good. Why is that an important date? Sort of. It's my birthday. Right? And here's why. Right? I am a living fossil. I don't feel so old inside. But that was the world before I was born. That was the world after I was born. That's scary. 4.5 billion new people and all that money. This is not causal relationship, by the way. I didn't do it. It was not my. I didn't stimulate it. I don't think we've really been paying attention to that, right? And we keep hearing the rich are getting the richer, poor are getting poorer. No. With certain exceptions, it's not true. This is Gapminder, Hans Rosling, cool guy, go there. This is the economic distribution of the world. Salary, number of people. That's 1970. That's the year 2000. 1970, 2000. The fundamental poverty then was Southeast Asia. The fundamental poverty now is ribbons through Africa, ribbons through Asia, right? And it's a very different world. And if I showed you the big economies within that pile, which is the entire world, those economies have doubled since 2000. We have a massive middle class, and Tom Friedman the other day said it's a virtual middle class. No, it's real. They cannot buy overpriced $29,000 American cars, but they can buy $3,500 cars made by China, sold through one of the happiest auto dealers in the world in Cairo, Egypt. Because he's flooding, he has exclusive control over that. So we have a version of purchasing power parity. They do too, right? There's more money out there than we really can think about. This money moves around. This is World Bank data. 2006, 150 million migrant workers. So these are guest arbiters going all over the place. A lot of times construction here, a lot of farming, things like that. They sent $300 billion back to their families. The World Bank knows they're underestimating that. That was up to $440 billion 2 years ago. They're estimating it will be $5 billion. This is the stuff they can count. And here's the big point. Those remittances from some of the poorest people, lowest wage people on earth, are 3 times the amount of official government aid, USAID, etc. 3 times that. And they're almost as large as the foreign direct investment mining infrastructure to those countries. So we have some of the poorest people from Bangladesh, a lot of them from there, right, and other parts going around the world. And they've got a fully functioning banking system which now runs on some of the best internet, it's not internet, but the best online banking which comes out of Africa. The stuff we have here is horrible. It's horrible. It's layer upon layer upon layer of legacy systems. They don't have legacy systems. Here is a big statistic. Go check me on it. I'll give you off by 5 points. I don't care. The U.S. and Western Europe spend 50% of our GDP on antiquated 20th century infrastructure systems. Do we need twisted pair copper wire? No. Do we need all those highways? No. If you live in an urban area, you think so. You think we need infrastructure improvement. You drive through most of the West as trucks, that's it. We could put them on a completely separate road. They'd go faster. The roads are now unnecessary. Nobody's noticing this. I don't see anybody in any of the newspapers. Vehicle miles traveled was the most sticky American statistic in the history of America. It was going up every year. We would go to war, literally, if someone threatened vehicle miles traveled, 1973, 1999. It's in the trillions. 1999, for the first time since the history of the invention of the automobile, vehicle miles traveled started coming down. That number's so big and so sticky, that says there's something very fundamental going on here. And it says we do not need the strip mall infrastructure that we built. We can't afford it. There's something clearly going on there, right? And we are spending half of our gross domestic product on that. The other $6 billion don't have it. They don't have cartels defending their old markets. They don't have government subsidies that support ancient phone systems and television and cable. So whenever they get this new money, what do you think they do? They spend it on absolutely the best stuff. They have Amazon, we have Amazon. Order it, push the button, it's there, right? They have eBay. Go look at eBay. eBay is basically the distribution system for Southeast Asia, right? Where does that stuff go? They get everything. Let me speed this up. This is 2006. Richer countries over here, poorer countries here, per capita penetration of PCs, per capita penetration of mobile phones, 40% in the poorest regions of the world. Question?
Can I go back to the comment before about eBay, Amazon being accessible in these countries? Anecdotally, I find that I have a hard time believing that. Based on, I have family in the developing world, I have friends who live in the developing world. They ask, we have to buy stuff here in the US, and then when we travel, we bring it with them because
I'm not doubting it at all.
The shipping systems there just doesn't even work.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that at all. And there are probably 1 billion people who don't have access. The large numbers are very different.
But my family were poor people in Sri Lanka. They just don't. They can't.
No, and it's also off the logistics system. Yes, let me just wrap.
Okay.
About 1 billion people.
Okay.
That includes your family.
Okay.
Right? Out of 7.
Okay.
The other 6 is where I'm focused. Is that right? I don't need to be. Yeah. No. We all have. What I want to get us away from anecdotal images, which are easy to sell on TV. Right? Here's the data. 2006, 40% mobile phone penetration in the poorest places on earth. This is last year. I was surprised. I found this the other day. This is a difference. This is over time. This is penetration developed and developing. It's basically 80%. So there's 80% penetration of mobile phones per capita in the poorest places on earth. Okay? And what does that mean? Right? We here think of one phone, one person. Iqbal Kadir, who started Grameen Phone, came into my class one day, asked the Americans, he says, what happens when you give an American one more cellular phone? What happens? Put the other one in the drawer, you look at it, play around, and get 7 things running. Then he said, what happens if you give a calorie-starved Bengali the means to avoid a 10-kilometer walk to get a single piece of information? Whoa, this guy's good. Think about that. We could probably walk 10 clicks. You got no food. Walking 10 clicks is a really big deal. Now, what kind of information would they want? One of the things he talked about is that when Grameen Phone launched their phones, they had no real idea what people would do. And they were coming up, you've probably all heard the stories about the fishermen and everything else. The one that intrigued me was weather. We assume everybody in the world has weather forecasting. No, they don't. Now, you've got a plot of land, 10 meters by 10 meters. It's monsoon. You have to worry about the same thing the big farmers do, which is that cell going to hit me right now? And that's the kind of information that's really valuable because it tells you something about your harvest. And one of the things that Iqbal said they did is they split the phones up and people began calling the local weather in. We just go to Weather Underground, push the button, and we see an animated radar map, right? These phones pull all kinds of valuable stuff into place. We think one phone, one person. What do they do there? Meaning there, where the bottom 2 billion are. They think it's a phone company, and they rent it out to as many as 1,500 people. This is entrepreneurship. This is huge ROIs, right? You can see this all over the world, and it's one of the reasons that I can say, except for pockets of the world, if you can get a signal or a ripped-off Wi-Fi, you can get access. This is what I do. Babson lets me do. Drive to the edge of electricity, literally. This is a little overzealous in Argentina. Look around, what do you see? I won't take you through this. Internet cafes everywhere, you see the same thing, right? Power lines. In most places in Africa, if you see a power line within about 100 kilometers, you can find someone who knows how to run internet protocol over a power line, and they can order the equipment, which is not expensive, and do so. The power companies don't even know it. It's sort of like those things you plug in your house to use the interior wire in your house. All over the world, this is a street vendor, Alibaba thing, have phones, and they're doing just-in-time inventory off their phones. Satellite dishes everywhere, and small power generators. Happens to be with a glacial stream, but small power generators all over the place, and car batteries. In a lot of the places I go, every kid knows how many hours of TV you can watch off a Chinese DC TV from a car battery. Those people who need to charge mobile phones where there is no electricity, families buy 2 batteries, one's always being charged, and the truck brings them back and forth, right? There's a 5-bar, the river where the gold miners were in Honduras, they had a 5-bar signal. In my house in Boston, I have to have a $200 booster antenna. I might get a 1-bar signal. Because we are investing money in old infrastructure, and they're not, and towers are $4,000, which is fairly easy for them to get right now on a collective basis. Their signals are good, they've got good quality, right? The poor do have resources. This is what I learned working before. They've got plenty of time. One of the things I keep hearing in Africa is Americans have watches. In Africa, we have time. Right? Think about that. So you have no money and no resources, but you've got time, and someone gives you a mobile phone. What do? You do exactly what Hippocrates said, is you understand everything it does. You really learn its capability and understand it's a computing device. There's a death-defying need to survive. The entrepreneurial spirit is not driven by greed, it's driven by, I have to figure out how to get through my day. Now, I don't want to go too weird on you, but do this sometime. Go to pick any place in the world and watch the poor kids, total orphans. You can do this in Shanghai if you want to. You can see it, go to the subway stations. You watch the organized orphan patrols with the guy giving them the little things to sell you. Do it in India, right? This is terrible. This is terrible. And then watch the kids. They're so savvy. I don't know whether to cry or hire them. I don't mean to be cynical or I don't mean to be glib about this, but this is reality, right? They really know how to sell. They really know what's going on. You watch their eyes. I want to buy things and take them all home, right? Death-defying need to survive and thrive, and powerful emotional intelligence. They can read you a mile away. And they have the University of Daily Survival, which I will soon translate to you as the peer-to-peer internet-based university. This makes them superb entrepreneurs. You know, I'm intentionally playing with words and mental models here. I hope I'm not offending you. If I am, I don't mean to. But I want to play around with some of our conceptions. Okay? And I'm not dismissing, believe me, I'm not dismissing the tragedies that are going on in the world. Believe me, I'm not. Right? They're superb entrepreneurs. What I often see is people coming in to try to help them, assuming that they don't have all these things. And a big point is, the last thing this person wants, who happens to be one of the food vendors in Haiti, is a not-for-profit business. We may find our mechanisms for delivering assistance are useful in a not-for-profit form. They don't care. Whatever is our organization is not relevant, and they're going for the highest profit they possibly can because that's their life and their family's life and their survival. Right? This also makes them great entrepreneurs. They've already transformed some businesses. This one I discovered by accident under a commercial contract from the North American folks in the music business. Basically, a bunch of folks in the music business in 2004 said, we have finally figured out after 2 or 3 years that music piracy is not our problem. That's really not relevant. Our problem is that our business model used to be getting a band that was unknown, dressing them up, and then making them famous for 10 years. And we would get the profits from the music that they sold. They would get the profits from live music and t-shirts. That was the business model. And they said, we're finding it harder and harder to keep bands famous long. That was it. It was very interesting. Very perceptive on their part. And they said, why? Right? I'm oversimplifying this. So they sent this out, about 5 or 6 of us, and I volunteered for the job of going to look at small bands all over the world. Just because I figured we're going to find something here. This is how I learned you can shoot anything. You can shoot anything on the ground, and just as long as you think you've got a story that's an excuse for a plane ticket, you can get paid, right? Music is absolutely universal. It is driving everybody. We have the Maslow hierarchy of needs. I use that a lot. But I think it used to say, well, you had to get all this other stuff before you had the self-actualization. And I think, no, you don't have the other stuff. You self-actualize anyway, because that's what keeps you going. Right? And music is it. It's everywhere. Right? So then what else happens is mobile phones go everywhere. We buy, back then, since 2004, 2005, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but right now, we, being North America and Western Europe, buy somewhere between 1.2 and 1.8 billion new mobile phones every year, and they're way over-featured. And we tend to get rid of them in about 18 months. They go into the used markets. Have you ever asked yourself where the phone goes that you drop into a little cardboard box? 2005, I'm teaching. 2 students from the back come up after class and say, Marty, we weren't paying attention in class today. So how do I know? You guys are online all the time anyway. So no, we're sorry. Hey, what were you doing? We were trading blocks of used cell phones. What does that mean? They were brokering blocks of 2,000 to 5,000 used phones in class online. And I said, interesting, how much did you make? They said, we don't know, we haven't got the clearances yet, but we think $2,000. And I said, you don't have to pay attention in class. You just got to explain to the rest of the class what this is about. So as long as 6 years ago, these phones were out there. So street vendor, and this is stuff I did find on this foray, for a street musician, and I'm using that loosely, street, can't afford the carrier, but uses the phone as a recording device, records songs. This is cool, new thing. Then discovers from the peer university of the internet that he or she can post those for free if he can find online access. Oh, there's somebody in the village that is selling a single dial-up line to 40,000 people. The return on investment's insane. So you go there, you get online, you load your 4 songs, and then it was Friendster and MySpace, right? Later, Facebook came in. You are now global. You have 4 or 8 songs online. Who's online looking for this? A whole bunch of folks looking for interesting music, especially clubs in Paris, who love authentic street music. They're sick and tired of all the washed up stuff they're getting from the official companies. So boom, global exposures, and if you're good, boom, you are invited to go to Paris. Now, this wasn't happening in huge numbers like hundreds of thousands, but this was happening in hundreds. So the word starts going out. You get invited to Paris to play in real clubs. You can find all this stuff online right now. I don't have time today. These are videos, right? So this is a group that has been up there for a while. They started a video. Where else did they get invited? Tokyo and Australia, UK, Sweden, and the Eastern Bloc. So all of a sudden, they're getting invitations to go there. Right? They then begin to learn from the peer-to-peer university of the internet how to do this, how to create a business model. Get yourself listed on Google some way. Right? Then you've got Facebook, MySpace. And then the word goes out, don't take the monetization model of them, they're asking too much. And because there were people already watching this mass of musicians coming up, They were building production tools for street musicians for online, which we didn't even have in America at that time. This is one of them, it's Goldeneyes had. It's two French programmers who said, everybody is trying to sell music to the customers. Nobody's paying attention to the bands. Let's do an online mixer. And the thing got sucked up by all the phones. This gets you 40% on your song, 40% margin. This gets you something like 15. Self-educated. We move it up. Then you put videos in, right? Then it really blows up. All the videos, right? And now we've got fully developed studios with high def. This is from Nigeria, all over the world. We don't see this stuff here except when we buy the stuff from them, and every once in a while they show up at our Grammys. But this is a whole music industry. Now what it has done is to create 50 to 100 million musicians who are online. And here's where the large numbers start coming in. I can guarantee that number because you can find it in searches. You just can't tell how durable those musicians are. So let's just take the 50 million, and let's assume they've got 4 songs online. Some would argue it's 400 million musicians because we got 7 billion people. The total number of songs sold, I haven't checked this in the last month, on Amazon or iTunes is 19 million. So you've got the whole Anglo music industry putting out 19 million songs, and this variety is out there. And it happens in all the different cultures, so there's a whole Asian group of this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Are we still doing okay? We're in the hypoglycemic hour. I'm just checking. Let me move up, right? This is what fundamentally shift the music business around. Now, did you understand everything I just said? You're nodding your head. Are you kidding me? 3%, right? How many of you got really what I'm talking about? Really? Really? And if you didn't, right, listening to me jabber like this, there's all kinds of, context. What's my tone? Who is this guy? What's his politics? Can he really be right? Because I'm talking about stuff that's not contextually believable for you, right? I want to get myself out of this, and then part of the living case is you can just provide this stuff. Everything I've told you is already there, and you can weave it together, and you can find the different pieces of it, and you can see it not just in Africa, which is where I was focusing on. You can see it all over Asia, and you couldn't understand the music or the language unless you understood the language. You can actually see it. That's part of the point of the living case. It is direct credibility. That is scary to people who need to be experts, but it is a wonderful way to get information and data across. It is really hard to do regression analysis on this. It is really hard to build mathematical models of this. But when you see it, and you one after the other, and you see the different types of bands, and you see the medical records I'm talking about, you don't need the data to understand that there's something real going on here. You also don't need to forecast what is the right thing. I love my country, and we have a mental model that says we have to forecast the solution, the best. Why? Most of our best solutions are only 20% effective. 90% of science is wrong every day. That's an extreme statement. But look at that. Science is so good, it disproves the hypotheses they thought were correct. Postmenopausal estrogen therapy, right? Vioxx, it was fully proved. Look at the actual processes. So why do we have to have the right answer? Why not many? We have a bunch of other living case streams underway. Extraction, mining, food, energy, health, shelter, community, transportation, a whole bunch of these. And they're basically loose collections of video. What we're trying to do right now, as I said, is to get the architecture to put it together. We have it running in the Babson servers, and this is what our students see. And they also contribute stuff. There are 3 years of alumni who are now building on this. Right? We also have courageous collaborators who have agreed to participate in an unpredictable future together. Right? Did I offend anybody? You all right? I'm just checking. I can't tell. I have to do this all the time. All right. I'm about to introduce Claire Pierre, right? Who is an absolutely wonderful person. We first met around some international medical kinds of things. Claire has been in the Clinton initiative in a number of different ways. Deeply involved in a number of things going on in Haiti. And about 3 years ago, when was the earthquake? 3 years ago. Basically was called to be effectively one of the people organizing the reconstruction of healthcare in all of Haiti. Right? We are now collaborating on a number of different kinds of things. What we're trying to do is to figure out how to get mobile connections in and out of Haiti so that we can begin to see the same kind of things going on there. I won't take the time to show it to you, but has anybody seen Ushahidi? You know what I'm talking about? Did you remember when Haiti, the earthquake happened? Within about 3 days? What was going on? Remember that? What did your memory? Real time. The guy from Google dropped on the ground, said wanted to make sure Google Maps is going. At that point, I believe there's about a 60% penetration of mobile phones in Haiti on Digicel, which is an interesting company. And everybody began reporting on Google Maps, here's where there's water, here's where there's food, here's where there are bad guys. Right? And these little dots began growing. Right? You could literally see in a crushed country the mobile infrastructure, right, being used from the bottom up. 3 days before the U.S. Navy got permits to put fuel in their ships to go to rescue. Right? I'm going to stop talking right now and turn things over to Claire, who will talk to you about a number of the discoveries and the real work that she's doing.
Thank you, Mike. I think I'm
Oh,
okay.
can you do it?
Good afternoon. I'm going to start with Haiti because it is what inspires me to consider social innovation. I was born in Haiti, and I was born in what you would consider to be the working class of Haiti. In their book, Why Nations Fail, the authors talk about Haiti as an extractive society, where you have 2% of the population, and what translates into maybe 15 families, who own everything. And then you have the rest of the population really living under the poverty line with a very thin working class. But as Marty mentioned, there was going to be a middle class. There was movement and there was progress in Haiti. I definitely was aware of it being a poor country. Growing up there, it was everywhere. We had a dictatorship that disrupted our social fiber. And, I remember on TV and ads and pamphlets about little girls that were about my age, with pictures of them being sent or provided during dinners for people to sponsor them, so that they could either go to school or travel or have access to a better life. So in the 1990s, political difficulties in Haiti brought me to the US. From there, I found myself going to high school, going to medical school, and eventually focusing on global health and technology. So that was my career. I was based at Harvard, and did that, traveling to Zambia and other places, and then slowly going back to Haiti until the earthquake. So on January 12, 2010, an earthquake hit the capital of Haiti and changed the country's landscape in many ways forever. I use this slide because it's the Inter-American Development Bank look at the impact of the earthquake on Haiti and comparing it to other disasters that most of us are very familiar with. I definitely know the numbers. You know, my role was, I left the day after the earthquake and I was in Haiti. And my role was first to volunteer for Partners in Health, then to volunteer under the UN Special Envoy's Office, which is President Clinton, who you mentioned, and then to later serve as the Senior Advisor for Health in the Recovery Commission. It was a brilliant idea. I thought at the time it was the thought that Haiti had received so much money pledged and promised, but never given, to have an entity that would be separate, sitting between the government of Haiti and partners to see where the money is going and to make sure that the projects that were above $1 million were actually meeting the needs was a huge and humbling role. So for about 18 months, I reviewed project after project and kept hope that the healthcare system in Haiti would change. But as I look at these numbers and I look at this impact, there's something that always stayed with me while I was there, and that is still difficult to grapple with. One is that behind these numbers are these children that I grew up with. Some of them were in Port-au-Prince. They were having their first shoe shop, hair salon, their first business. They were trying to sustain their lives in the capital. They didn't understand aid the way we saw it, and when I was done with my time, I came back to Harvard confused and really wanting to step back. I definitely knew that I wanted to continue my global health career. Policy to increase and access to change and access to quality of care and health care to those who need it most is definitely something that I would want to work on and that I do work on. But I also thought I spent a lot of time treating things that were preventable. 500,000 people or more were infected by the cholera outbreak. If cholera happened here, a few of you would be really, really uncomfortable. It's a horrible disease. But your drinking water and your sewage system are separate. You can flush and not have to worry much. And you can have access to care and be rehydrated very quickly. It didn't make sense to me that people were dying from cholera and still are today. So it's endemic because we don't have water and sanitation systems. Every year, thousands of people continue to die and will continue to die until we can get it on access. So I had to step back and think about things in simpler terms. These are really results of poverty. And it's not for lack of ingenuity. It's just everywhere. Marty spoke about it, and there are examples just abounding. Aid is wonderful. Like, without it, a lot of social programs wouldn't work. A lot of people's lives have changed, but it can be more effective. And the question is, what do the people in Haiti want? What did the people most affected want? We'll never know. It's hard to survey 10 million people. But we did do a small study within the first month after the earthquake, asking people both within, who are living in the tents that were displaced by the earthquake, as well as people outside of Haiti, outside of the earthquake affected zone, in the rural area. What do you see in the future? What is the main thing you'd like? And most people actually said jobs. They didn't ask for water or a new building, or they asked for jobs. Yet, we knew this data, and there were huge contradictions. A little girl, about 6, was affected by the earthquake and lost her leg. So we bought her clothes and shoes. We didn't know what her shoe size was, so we bought 3 pairs. One fit, the others didn't. One would question why bring shoes in the first place. It was an emotional thing for her to receive. But then her response, after trying them on and noticing that a few of them didn't fit, was to say, "Hey Mom, maybe we can give one of them to my sister." The mom politely answered, "No, it's too small for your sister." And then she said, "Maybe we can sell them." She was probably 6. Now, that's something we would celebrate, right? Someone who takes the resources that she may or may not have needed, but that were given to her, and apply it to something else to sustain her family or help with others in her life. But selling of donated goods was being written on our newspapers every day as a form of corruption. Tents are being sold, etc., etc. I later received a letter, an official letter. It was quite impressive, from 3 young men who organized themselves as an association from their neighborhood. And what they wanted from us was a copier. They wanted us to give them 1 copier so that they could start a photocopying business. It made sense. People had lost a lot of their resources, a lot of their papers, a lot of their documents. So having someone in the neighborhood that they could trust and make copies from, and probably share and store them in a separate place, was something that it was definitely a demand. Again, it was a for-profit request. We couldn't honor it. And so on and so forth. We're on an island, we share the island, we have severe malnutrition, but we import fish. It feels like something's lost in translation, and it feels like the contradictions were too many. And so I tried to figure out what the disconnect was. And when we look at it from the Haitian's perspective, and what I say here is never to translate what 10 million Haitians would think, but what we see in the newspapers and the discussions on the radio, but also in group and community settings, conversations with farmers, associations and local associations, is that they're confused about this aid versus investment conversation. They don't use these words, but they know that people work for years on submitting a grant. They have associations and these foreigners who come and say, I'm an NGO and I'm going to help you with it. Tell me what their need is. And then a year or two later, they have objectives, have measures, and things happen, and people are traveling and money's coming. There's some change in what they see, but to them, that person has a job. They can't distinguish the nonprofit, for-profit version of it. This person is profiting from this situation, not with ill intent, but to them, there's no difference. Haiti has more NGO per capita than most countries in the world. When we started counting before the earthquake, we got to 4,000 and stopped within a month. On the other end of this is the conversation about investing and impact investment in Haiti and the risks and the difficulties and the lack of infrastructure and what would the return on investment be. But Marty gave quite a few examples of small investments with high returns. So this brought me to think a little bit more about a part of my career that could include impact investing in a way that would connect, create, and co-create, collaborate with those in Haiti who need it most and who have wonderful ideas, as well as those of us here who have resources and skills that we can share, not assuming that it wouldn't be a conversation in multiple ways. In the early 2000s, we brought some students from MIT, some students from Harvard, some students from the University of Zambia to a rural area in Zambia to work on water and sanitation problems. And it was interesting to see that the students learned more, all students, and when I say students, across the university settings, learned as much from us faculty as they did from the community stakeholders. So the model we want to create is truly not one of aid or business, but it's truly an open platform where, as Marty mentions, these living cases are taken, sliced, diced, recreated, co-created, and used for development and growth. So I'll stop here and ask Marty to join me so that we can have questions about where we are and what we're doing.
This